Tonight's presentation of SAA Storytellers is made possible with support from Bristol Myers Squibb.
Welcome and thank you for attending. Also, for those of you who will be watching the archived version of this presentation, SAA YouTube channel, welcome. SAA Storytellers, Your Stories on Stage, is a virtual community storytelling show that is an extension of the community stories featured in our quarterly news magazine, Spondylitis Plus. A special thank you to Bristol Myers Squibb, who have helped make this space possible. The stories presented here are pre-recorded, but we are gathering live tonight to celebrate the spondylitis community and the healing power of story. Tonight's storytellers are Vince Gagliardi, Minnie Wilson, Jamie Boer, and Linda Strand. Please post comments before, during, or after the stories. Since our founding in 1983, the Spondylitis Association of America has been the face, the voice, and the leading nationwide nonprofit organization educating, empowering, and advocating for people living with spondyloarthritis. Our mission is to be a leader in the quest to cure ankylosing spondylitis and related diseases, and to empower those affected to live their lives to the fullest. SAA has many resources. Just click on the link in the chat to learn more. Okay, so let's get started. Our first storyteller tonight is Vince Gagliardi. Vince is a lifelong resident of New Jersey. He has been a certified composite sketch artist, a chief of detectives, retired 2019, and an adjunct professor in English literature at Union County College. Since 2020, Vince has been the owner, CEO of SJG3 Collectibles. His love of toys is from his grandfather, who worked in the toy industry and used to take him to work for many years. Vince is married and has one son. He was diagnosed with AS just a little over 2 years ago and constantly receives tremendous support from family and friends. In his spare time, he loves to go to the beach, watch old Universal Monsters films, Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, and anything pro wrestling. He's also a long-suffering New York Mets and Tennessee Titans fan. Let's hear his story.
So every May, my family and I go on a trip to Disney World. We've been doing that since my son was 4 years old, and now he's in college. So it has even deeper meaning for me to spend time with him. And our trips have changed over the years. Number one, because of my AS, I can't go on as many rides as I used to, but that's okay because now I concentrate more on the restaurant parts. And secondly, this time, we always take family photos, but this time I knew it was going to look different because when we went in May, I was in the midst of not cutting my hair for over a year and a half. And the reason for that being is I had a few side effects happen from my biological, one of which I was losing my hair in clumps. So my hair was pretty much shoulder length. So we get to Disney World. We'll save the pictures for later, but we get to Disney World, and when we check into the hotel, my magic band isn't working. And if you don't know what a magic band is, you wear it at Disney and you can check into the hotel, you can pay for dinner with it, you can buy souvenirs, you can get into the parks. It's be all end all. Well, mine wasn't working. Luckily, my son was there and he was able to use his, and we were able to check into the hotel. The next morning, and anyone with AS can relate to this, I was having trouble sleeping. And what's the most important thing for me to do and others to do is move around. So I decided at 6 o'clock in the morning to take a walk around the resort. And I guess because there's a lot of little kids, shop is open very early. So I went inside and I figured I would shop for a new Magic Band, which I found one that I liked, Magic Band Plus. So I brought it over to the counter where the cast member was, and I said, listen, can you set this thing up for me because my son is sleeping and I want to get it ready? And he said he couldn't, but if I went to the front desk, someone there, another cast member, they always have someone there that can set it up. So I go to the front desk, and I was assigned by one cast member to go to another cast member. And there was a young woman waiting for me behind the counter. Actually, she was to the side of the counter. And she was great. She set that Magic Band up 2 seconds. And she apologized to me because she was wearing a face mask. And she said, I don't want you to think I'm sick. I'm just wearing a face mask because I don't want to get sick because I have an autoimmune disease. And I said, well, that makes two of us. She says, what do you have? I said, well, you brought it up. You go first. She says, you probably never heard of it. It's called ankylosing spondylitis. And at that point, you could have blown me through the doors of the resort all the way to the back of the Magic Kingdom. I was stunned. You have to understand, I've never met anyone with AS. I've talked to people through my group sessions, but I've never met anyone face to face. And it was incredible. She started telling me her story. I started telling her my story. And she was telling me how Disney accommodates her. For example, she was standing on a pad about this thick. It's the type of pad people stand on when you wash dishes. But it was very comfortable for her. And that's why she was standing to the side of the counter. What was the really great part is she said Disney offered her a chair. And she says, and the reason I didn't want the chair. And I said, because the more you sit, the stiffer you'll become and the more pain you'll be in. So I was finishing her sentences. It was incredible. And she had a great attitude, just a great attitude. And it was really inspiring. It really was. I'll tell you how inspiring it was. So that afternoon, my family and I went to the Magic Kingdom. We were there for a couple hours. It was getting super hot. We were going to go back to the resort pool. And I said, you guys go ahead. I got to make a stop. And I walked into the Magic Kingdom barbershop. Now, that's for people, for kids, really about 10, probably closer to 5, maybe 4 years old, to get their haircuts like it's a special deal at Disney. But I walked in, it was empty. It was at the end of it. They were about to close. I asked the manager behind the counter, the cast member, if I get a haircut. He said, sure. So I met another cast member. She had me sit down. And she said to me, why do you want to cut your hair? It's so beautiful. And I said, I'm going through something medically, and I'm having some side effects, and I just think it's time for a change. I never mentioned that I had AS, never mentioned any particulars, unlike with the first cast member. So she turned me around away from the mirror, and she starts cutting my hair. And she was pointing out the spots where my hair was going extremely thin. And besides that, we just had a nice conversation. About 15, 20 minutes later, she spins me back around, and I'm looking in the mirror. She shows me my haircut. I think it was the first time in my life I was ever emotional from haircut, because I saw what I used to look like. And she started getting emotional because I was getting emotional. And I said, thank you. I went up to pay, and the manager, the cast member behind the counter, says, this one's on Mickey. And I was blown away. I was blown away. So I tipped the cast member who cut my hair. I want to make sure she got a good deal out of dealing with me. And I said, can I get a picture? So I took a picture with her. I said, can I get a hug? She said, absolutely. And she said in my ear, she says, I wish you all the best in your medical journey. And it was incredible. And this is all because, obviously, the first cast member with AS inspired me. And it was something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. It was just so overwhelming and so inspiring. And I made sure that I contacted Disney that night via email to tell them how much those meant to me. So it really meant a lot.
Hi, Vince.
How you doing, Sean?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I'm having a good day.
Hey, that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your story on SAA Storytellers and sticking around for our little interview session. So I wanted to ask you a question because you've been very passionate about your job. And I was wondering if your job also keeps your mind off pain. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I started my own business back in late 2020 after spending close to 3 decades in law enforcement. I grew up in the toy business. My grandfather got me started. In fact, I wanted to show everyone this is the first Star Wars figure he gave me back in 1978, and I still have it. I keep it in my office. And I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. I tell everyone I feel like when I work 8 to 10 hours, it's like I'm working 8 to 10 minutes. And it takes my mind off the pain absolutely because I'm very fortunate. New merchandise comes in every day, all day. And even though I'm in my 50s, I have the mind of like a 10-year-old. So I get excited when all these goodies come in. And as you can see, I have a ton of them behind me.
Yeah, you had something new back there? It looks huge. What
I
is that?
do. This is a cutout huge of the Thing from the new Fantastic Four movie coming out. I just got this week, and there was no other place to put it, so I didn't put it just for the video. That's going to be its permanent spot.
It's amazing, and I don't think it's not leaving your office either. Is that there forever?
It
Yeah,
definitely, yeah, that's mine.
that's yours. Awesome. So, along with that, your story is so touching and so well spoken about how you can meet people with AS, anywhere, including Disney. Who are some caregivers and heroes in your life that help you get through your day when you do stuff?
Obviously, my family has been incredible. My wife Susan, my son Jackson, my mom and dad, and my brother and his family, as well as my one of my other sister-in-laws and brother. They've been absolutely outstanding. Um, it's been a tough go of it. I mean, it was a stunning diagnosis after a long period of not knowing what was going on. And they see me in the good days, and they also see me on the bad days. So it's a lot to take in. But if it's okay with you, I also want to mention the group sponsored meetings on the first Tuesday of every month have been a godsend. So if I can't shout out to Bob Ambrose, he's our group leader.
Hmm.
It's amazing. To again in my story, I said I had never met someone face to face, but the in the group sessions was the first time I actually was able to communicate with anyone that had AS because I didn't even know what it was when I got diagnosed with it.
Thank you so much for mentioning the SEA support groups. SEA actually kind of began as a support group over 40 years ago. So it makes me feel so good that, here we are so far down the road and someone like yourself is still benefiting from our support group program. So thank you for your kind words. And I'm going to let Bob know that you've said such wonderful things. All right. So one more question, sort of thought from you is, so if someone who has been recently diagnosed with AS or um, needs some encouragement and support, what's a word you would tell them or a short phrase?
Well, it's not to go it alone. Um, I I got choked up one of the times I was talking to you in the past about it, and it was the fact that shortly after I was diagnosed, I was sitting in my backyard, and I'm like, "What do I do? Who can I talk to about this?" Because your family can help you, sure, right? Your family, but you really want to talk to somebody who is experiencing what you're experiencing. And I Googled support groups for AS, and that's how I found the SAA meetings with Bob Ambrose. I called him at home, and I introduced myself, and we hit it off, and it's been a big help. So I highly recommend, no matter where you are, if you can find people like that to talk to besides your family, somebody that understands what you're going through too, it's a big help.
Thank you so much, Vince. That's a perfect place to leave this interview. You've been so much fun to work with. It's been so great to meet you. Your story's so touching. Thank you so much for the kind words about our support groups. It's a pleasure to get to know you, and thank you so much for being on SAA Storytellers.
You're very welcome. My pleasure to do it.
A big thank you to Vince for sharing his inspiring story and being part of SAA Storytellers. If you'd like to learn more about his amazing online store, please go visit it. It's amazing. Click on the link in the chat. Okay, our next storyteller is Minnie Wilson. Minnie is from Goldsboro, North Carolina, but has spent most of her life in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she currently resides in Durham, North Carolina. She loves animals and spending time with her cat. Spondylitis has forced her to keep her social life relatively simple. So after a misdiagnosis, she was finally correctly diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis in 2007 and psoriatic arthritis in 2019. Minnie is on a journey to pour her heart into advocating for spondylitis. She works full-time as administrative assistant for a local university, and she's one of the leaders of the SAA Raleigh-Durham support group. Let's hear her story.
Hello, my name is Minnie Wilson, and I am a spondylitis patient. I have ankylosing spondylitis and psoriatic arthritis. I was born with issues from both of them. My mother mentioned me having skin rashes as an infant. I had skin rashes all throughout my childhood. They'd be on and off, sometimes more on than off, and I had a lot of finger pain as a child that made it a little difficult to ride my bike and do regular kid stuff. Things kind of leveled out for a little while, and I didn't have the issues with the rashes, but they came back during my teenage years. I also started having a lot of trouble with hip pain when it rained, when it was cold, and it would go and come. It was a little bit unpredictable at times, and then it seemed like it got under control. In my 20s, it came back, and it was there. It felt like permanently, like it just would not go away. It kept getting worse and worse, and it was there all the time. I kept going to several rheumatologists, just trying to get a diagnosis, trying to find out what was going on. And I was finally incorrectly diagnosed with another form of spondylitis. That helped me to get on the medications that would give me proper treatment for spondylitis. However, it was not targeted specifically for the psoriatic arthritis and the ankylosing spondylitis, which tend to have more specific treatments. So I started improving a little bit, and then in my 30s came the relentless back pain. The pain was all the time, worse at night, waking me up at night. It just all I could think about was my back always hurting. So finally at age 37, with a new rheumatologist, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis. It was a tremendous relief to finally have a diagnosis, but it was also scary because it's such a big, I didn't know what it was. So I started on biologics. My symptoms improved drastically. I started feeling normal, feeling great. Like I had not felt like that before. So I did not know what it felt like to feel that good. And then I hit 40 and my life changed. I started having migraines every single day. Had like a 3-month migraine. My entire body was in pain. I struggled and struggled and struggled with just trying to just function. It was hard to work, hard to think, just hard to do the basic things of life. So I went to see my neurologist about the pain, my migraine pain, and I was very depressed, but I did not realize how depressed I was because I had just been pushing through like I had been all my life. But she looked at me and saw the depression in my spirit, and she asked me to please promise her that I would listen to her, take her advice, and that she was going to help make me better. And she said, things may get a little bit worse before they get better, but I promise I'm going to make you better. So she scheduled me a therapy appointment for the next day to help me cope with the mental strain of living with that much pain. And that therapy was amazing because it helped me. Okay, I can use these methods to cope with the spondylitis pain as well. And it did change my life and started making things a whole lot better. And it made it so that I could show up and be in places and look normal like everybody else, which is a plus and it's also a downfall because people don't always realize you're sick when they see your smile or they see you showing up, being present, and doing things that other people are doing. And things kind of leveled out. Migraines got better with treatment. I turned 50 and finally got my psoriatic arthritis diagnosis. And that was surprising, being that I was born with, having symptoms as an infant. I was okay for a little while, and I woke up one day this past fall with more pain than I had ever experienced from any of the spondylitis. I felt like someone threw me down some concrete steps. The pain was intense. I could not shake it off. Like we normally get up, we can move around and things just get better. Like that day, it got worse. Every day it got worse. There was no improvement. I was back and forth on steroids a little bit, had a bout with uveitis, and that lasted for several months. So finally I switched rheumatologists and was able to get a new treatment, and things have improved for me significantly. So I want to say to you that I have survived every single bad day that I have had. It always gets better. And I want you to keep that in mind when you're having your pity party and not sure if you can go on, that you will get through and it does get better. Thank you.
Hi, Minnie.
Hey, Sean.
Thank you so much for being on SAA Storytellers. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we had a really great conversation recently about something super important that I think people need to hear about. And it's how you've been connecting with people virtually.
Living with spondylitis, a lot of times you find yourself living in a lot of isolation. And during COVID, we were definitely isolated. And so I've managed to make a lot of online friends, which was very different from the way I had lived the rest of my life. I managed to connect with a wonderful group of people who are into old school music, and we listen to music every weekend and together. We've had long video chats, but we love old school R&B music, Earth, Wind and Fire, some Phil Collins, like anything old school pop night. Like we just mix it all up, but we're the old school family on Facebook.
So if someone is struggling to connect just in general with this disease, obviously we send people over to the SAA website because there's a lot of ways to get involved there. There's support groups. We have a lot of information. But how, like if I was newly diagnosed and trying to meet others through social media, like what would I do? Like how would I start?
I basically did a search for ankylosing spondylitis on Facebook, and I was blown away to see that there were several groups and there were thousands of people with the disease. Like I did not expect to see a group with 10,000 people, and the numbers are way higher than that now. But just doing that, the different groups, I made a lot of friends, people I know all over the world, and some of the most amazing people I've ever met.
And I have to say, you're also selling yourself a little short because I've seen some of your comments and they're amazing. You've been helping so many people. I'll read through some posts and Minnie will pop up. You're so good at social media and you're so thorough. Absolutely. You give really great answers to folks. I've seen some folks who've posted and there hasn't been too much reaction, but you will be one of them. Be like, hang in there, or, so I guess my question is, do you get support and feel good when you help others online and try to give them resources? Is that fulfilling for you?
Yes, it is, because I went through so many years of battling this disease and feeling absolutely alone. Because of where the research was, there was just not a community of us. There wasn't social media because there was not the internet. And so knowing that I can help make someone's journey a little bit easier and shorter to get solutions is life-changing for me, because at least I know they can get treatment earlier and they may resume their normal life activities. So yes, I definitely get a lot of support just from supporting others.
Well, I'm super inspired by you because you have taken social media and really made them even better. But like every time I read something you write, or every time I speak to you about it or learn about your story, how it's helped you personally, I'm like, yeah, this is what it's for. This is what it's
Yes.
used, for good. So
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for all the work you do as a support group leader, and that extra little bit you do online, which helps me a lot when I'm talking to other patients. I know that you're out there spreading good information and good resources and good vibes and old school music. And
Yes.
before I let you go, I have two questions for you. Who's your favorite old school band? And what is like one word or phrase you would say to someone who is newly diagnosed?
My favorite old school band would probably be the OJs. And something I would say to someone that is newly diagnosed is you have most likely been living with this disease for a while. So it is not the end of the world. You just have to learn how to live differently. However, treatment has come so far in the last several years. There are treatment options, whereas before there were not any. So life will improve for you. It will get better. Yes, you will have some bad days, but you can get through this.
Minnie, thank you so much. You were such a great friend to SAA. And like I said before, you really helped me personally do my job. So thank you so much for being on the show and being vulnerable and honest and sharing your story and giving good tips about social media. And I know I will be in touch with you soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
Many thanks to Minnie for sharing her personal story with such honesty and being part of this project. I had mentioned that Minnie is an SAA support group leader, and SAA's spondyloarthritis educational support groups are a network of people living with and taking an active role in managing their disease. All are welcome, including parents, caregivers, loved ones living with spondyloarthritis. I'll put a link in the chat that explains more about our support group program. Also, I want to share that SAA doesn't receive any government funding, and we rely on private donations. Funds received help sustain programs like our National Support Group program. I'll put a link in the chat to our donation page if you'd like to help SAA fulfill its mission. You can volunteer, give a gift in memory or a tribute of someone. There are so many ways to support SAA. Okay, our next storyteller is Jamie Boder. Jamie is a yoga teacher, personal trainer, and health and nutrition coach. He's also an axial spondyloarthritis and Crohn's patient, passionate advocate, skateboarder, and musician. He specializes in working with people living with axial spondyloarthritis, helping them move safely, build strength, and improve their quality of life. Let's hear his story.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back about a decade. And this was shortly after I'd been diagnosed with AS, and I was 18. So my first career, and the career I thought I wanted to do at the time, was event management. And I was doing a summer internship for an event production company. And this company was in charge of mostly sports and music events. So this particular event I was working at was a skateboard and music festival, which was a bit of a dream for me because I've been going to this festival for years, and I'm a keen skateboarder, and still am a keen skateboarder. And so basically I was working at the festival site. And the week I was there, my job was to work in the site part of the events, so site management. Basically, this is being in charge of helping to actually set up the event and take down the event at the end. And I was in the site office, and a co-worker I was working with turned to me and said, "Are you able to help with moving some boxes for the event?" And at that time, I hadn't really disclosed about the diagnosis. I just said that I was dealing with some issues, some pain, and didn't really go any further. But I knew at that time, because I was in the midst of a really bad flare-up, that I wouldn't be able to help. I wouldn't be able to move any heavy objects, because I was in a really bad place. The disease was kind of out of control, probably one of the worst flare-ups I'd ever had. So I disclosed to the coworker that I was dealing with a lot of pain because I'd been diagnosed with a condition called ankylosing spondylitis. And it's funny because when you say ankylosing spondylitis to a stranger, it feels like you're talking about some sort of wizard spell. And so you don't really expect for them to really understand what you're talking about. But another guy was in the room who I'd known through skateboarding for about 5 years prior. And this is someone who was standing in the room, very tall, muscular guy, in good shape, and had been a skateboarder and surfer for most of his life. And he turns to me, he goes, "Ankylosing spondylitis?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I've lived with that for years." And I was kind of flabbergasted. Like, I had no idea that he had AS. And this is the kind of real component of an invisible illness, right? So it was invisible to me that he had AS. So that was obviously quite serendipitous. And we went for a walk around the festival site. And I was in quite a dark place at that time, as well as dealing with a lot of pain. I think I was in a lot of emotional pain, really struggling with not only coming to terms with the condition, but really being worried that I wouldn't be able to continue skateboarding, because that was a huge part of my life and my identity. And I'd been doing that since I was like super, super young. So my big passion in life. It was actually the first thing I said to my rheumatologist after I was diagnosed. Was, I didn't say any other questions, was, can I keep skateboarding? And I had a lot of healthcare professionals tell me that I'd have to stop skateboarding, stop any high impact activities. So I was feeling pretty low about all of that. So anyway, we were walking around the festival and just chatting and hearing about his experiences. And he said, never stop doing what you love. Never let AS get in the way of basically your joys and your passions. It's not going to be easy. It's not always plain sailing, but find a way. Always find a way. And that day, I hadn't done any skateboarding for about a month because it was just too painful. And at that time, I thought that, you know, it was going to just make things worse. And we ended up going for a little skateboard session on a half pipe. And I remember just like pumping up and down this half pipe and being like, loving it, feeling so free, and knowing that I would never let AS get in the way of doing what I love. And it doesn't mean it's been easy and plain sailing, but it showed me in that moment that it was possible. I love the phrase "stand on the shoulders of giants," and seeing my friend who, you know, had lived with AS for a very long time, who's not only, you know, active, but a skateboarder and a surfer, that was a real moment of elation for me. And I felt really inspired and knew it was possible. So, you know, the takeaway that I got from that and the real pivotal change in my mindset was never stop doing what you love. Doesn't mean you have to do things in the same way. You might have to adapt, but adapt and overcome and never give up.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey, Sean.
Thank you so much for being on SAA Storytellers and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, and always love connecting with SAA and the community.
You know, your story was so great. It was a wonderful story of connection, and you never know who's going to have AS, and it can pop up in the most surprising places. So thanks. We haven't had a story like that, so thanks for doing that.
No, absolutely.
I also wanted to start our chat a little bit with your early signs of AS. You had a lot going on and went through a lot, and I think our viewers and listeners would like to learn more.
So I started having symptoms of quote unquote autoimmunity from really early childhood, gastrointestinal symptoms, psoriasis, issues with my feet, and none of those were picked up as autoimmune. And that kind of went on and on until when I was 14, I started getting some more serious issues with both my bowels and pain in what I thought was my hip. And then eventually, after another 4 years of searching and dealing with loopholes and trying to jump through hoops, and eventually pushed to get a diagnosis when I was 18.
And you talked about your toes in the past. and how your feet. You've had quite a ride with your feet, right?
Yeah, so one of the symptoms that can go with axial spondyloarthritis is psoriasis of the toenails. And it's one of those things where AS and other autoimmune diseases can be invisible, and that can sometimes make them even more challenging. But then also, sometimes it can make it visible. And psoriasis or nail psoriasis is an example of that, where, even now, things are in a very good place with the symptoms overall. But when I look at my toenails, it's a bit of a stark reminder, and not something that I wish people to see unless they can deal with very extraterrestrial looking toes.
And I think you had said to me earlier that there was some self-confidence issues with your feet, if that you've been dealing with in your life. So that's something that you have to, hide or talk about, or, I mean, you can't run from it, right? I mean,
it's funny. I went for a massage I was in Morocco, and I was on a surf trip, and I went for a massage, and halfway through, she just stopped. She looked at my toenails, and started tutting, and then decided to give me a pedicure for the remainder of the. And I've got to say, whatever she did to them, they did look really good for about a week afterwards. The overall psoriatic arthritis look of them was massively improved. So maybe that's the trick.
So this is a really good lead into some of your other hobbies, because you said you were on a trip, a surfing trip or something like that. So I know you have a lot of extreme sports love. You want to share a little bit about your other hobbies with sports?
Yeah, so I started skateboarding when I was about 9 and never really stopped. It was a huge, huge passion, and took it pretty seriously when I was in my younger years. AS and the diagnosis of AS and Crohn's kind of put that to a bit of a stop. And for years I couldn't really skate. And as I mentioned in the story just now, finding a level of hope where I thought, okay, it might be possible to get back to these hobbies that I love. And once I started being able to skateboard again, I became increasingly excited about other extreme sports, mostly board sports. So got into snowboarding, and I'm still very much a beginner, I'd say, and same with surfing. So there is a transferable skill between skateboarding and other board sports, but I'm still definitely a beginner, and that's a lot of fun.
And I think you'd mentioned that surfing you were excited about because the water is very healing for AS and stuff like that. So you were excited to learn more about surfing.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a little bit less urban than skateboarding, a little bit more longevity, and hopefully I can skate for the rest of my life. But I think surfing's a good insurance as well. I know people surf, well into their later years for sure.
Awesome. You also had shared with me that you like comedy shows and music shows. Do you visit a lot of those, like around Europe and UK?
Yeah, for sure. I actually had a stint of doing stand-up comedy a few years back, and actually going and doing open mics, and that was terrifying. And the good
it's humbling, isn't it?
It's definitely humbling, and teaches you that some days you can do the same thing and it go amazingly, and other days you can do the same thing and it go terribly, which is kind of like what it's like living with a chronic health condition. Like, you can show up in the same way, but sometimes things feel different. But I'm a musician, and comedy really helped me to get more comfortable being on stage as well. So maybe I'll revisit comedy at some point, but it was a good experience in the past tense. But now I'm going to keep it there.
Absolutely. I've only dipped my toe in it a little bit, and it was terrifying. So yeah. All right. So thank you for that. So moving on to the last bit, tell me about yoga for AS.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're looking for an online community that's kind of global, really, at this point, where you can connect with others living with AS and other related forms of inflammatory arthritis, but mostly AS, and learn how to not only do yoga, but also strength training, and learn movement practices, practices for deep relaxation, stress reduction, and do so in like a safe and connected community. That's really what it's all about. So you can really find out more on yogaforas.com, but also feel free to connect with me on my socials at Jamie Boda and also at Yoga for AS.
Perfect. I'll put a link in the chat to Yoga for AS. We work with you at SAA, and we have a landing page that folks can come in that way if they find it easier to come in through SAA or they're already on the SAA site. Jamie, thank you so much for telling your story and sharing your time and talent with us and all the good work you do in the yoga community. It's a pleasure to know you, and thank you for being on SAA Storytellers.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks to everyone watching.
A big thank you to Jamie for sharing his touching personal story, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I hope you're enjoying these storytellers. If you'd like to learn more about Jamie, his practice, and Yoga for AS, just click on the link in the chat. Okay, and before I introduce our final storyteller of the night, I wanted to share that we welcome your feedback. Please take our post-SAA Storytellers presentation survey. This is also an opportunity to connect with us and express some interest in being a storyteller, so just click on that too. Okay. Our final story tonight is from Linda Strand. Linda is a lifelong Minnesotan. She graduated from college with a major in elementary education and a minor in music. She's married with 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren. She taught first grade and then taught adult education for 27 years. The last 17 years of her career, she taught adults with disabilities, and most of her students had brain injuries or spinal cord injuries. Through a statewide grant, Linda trained adult education teachers in best practices for teaching adults with disabilities. She developed and wrote curriculum for adult learners and strategies for teachers, and she presented workshops throughout the state of Minnesota. She's now retired and enjoys life to the fullest through travel, family time, and volunteering. And let's hear her story.
My dad was a loving father to 7, a good husband to my mom, kind, well-read, active in the community, and he was a farmer. So why am I talking about my dad when this video is about ankylosing spondylitis? Here's why. Throughout my growing up years, I could see my dad struggling with pain. Of course, I never thought much about it, because there was always a lot of talk about old people having arthritis or rheumatism. That's what I thought it was. And I thought it was normal for older people to feel that way. As my dad aged, his back became stiff, and he had a very limited range of motion in his neck. Neck movements caused severe pain. Interestingly, I never connected his pain to the pain I've experienced. Dad never complained. He would come in from his farm work at noon and would lay down on the hard floor, put a newspaper over his head, and rest. As I reflect on this, I realize that he came in looking very pale and appeared to be in noticeable pain. Eventually, we'd get off the floor, have lunch, go back outside to do more farm work. Imagine lifting, twisting, shoveling, carrying heavy things, bending and riding a tractor as it bumped across the field. As a typical teenager, I didn't pay much attention. He was active in the community and his church. He served on the school board. He attended all our music and sports activities and continued to farm with the help of my brother, who eventually took over the farm. What could he do to manage his pain? Physical therapy was not available back then. Pharmaceuticals had not been developed for this condition. There were some home remedies, but none of those helped. There was no way of determining what was wrong with my dad. The only thing they had was aspirin. He would take aspirin until he got bleeding ulcers. Did we assume he just had more rheumatism or arthritis than others his age? How does this relate to me? From the time I was in elementary school, I had aching. My parents took me to the doctor more than once and were told I had growing pains. As I grew up, my back was stiff compared to other kids my age. By the time I was in high school, my neck pain increased. It wasn't constant. I would go through what I now think of as a flare-up and then would go back to being normal. When I was in college, I had many episodes of severe undiagnosed neck pain. While in college, I needed a physical education course, and the only class I could fit into my schedule was modern dance. Not a good choice for more reasons than stiffness and pain. Thankfully, I had an understanding but puzzled professor. She couldn't understand why I couldn't bend like others in the class. She asked lots of questions and expressed some concern, but she was supportive of me, even with my limitations, and I passed the class. It didn't dawn on me that I might have any type of illness. Through the years, I continued to have periods of pain. It didn't keep me from raising our kids, teaching, traveling, volunteering, or whatever I was involved in at the time. I doctored, but there was never a diagnosis. I'd been in physical therapy, and the therapist said he didn't dare do any more therapy until he knew more about what was causing my pain. By then, my pain spasm had become so severe that my primary doctor determined we had to find a reason. She sent me for an MRI, and the alarm bell sounded. My neck structure had been destroyed to the point that if I moved wrong, I was in danger of having a spinal cord injury. I was immediately sent to a neurologist who fitted me with a brace similar to what people wear after breaking their neck. I wore that for about 3 months, 24/7, and my neck structure is now a mass of bone spurs, but it's stable. The neurologist sent me to an amazing rheumatologist. He spent well over 2 hours asking me about my history and my family's history. When I told him about my dad, he smiled. He told me he thought he had a diagnosis, but wanted one more x-ray. He showed me the x-ray and said I had ankylosing spondylitis. He told me about the disease and what to expect in the future. His words, "If only I could have seen you years ago, we could have prevented some of the pain and damage." A combination of pharmaceuticals, physical therapy, and occasional prednisone managed my pain most of the time. Unfortunately, the drug that worked was off the market. Nothing else seemed to work. The rheumatologist suggested I see a doctor in physical medicine and rehabilitation. Trigger point injections and facet joint injections have been huge in managing my pain. For me, nerve ablation did not help. Yes, there were days the pain was and is difficult to work through. I rarely talk to people about what I have because no one seems to have heard of it. My family and friends are there for me with concern and love. That makes a huge difference. So, back to my dad. He lived his life to the fullest. He did not let ankylosing spondylitis stop him. Of course, he didn't know what he had. He demonstrated his inner strength through his actions. Never give up. And that is my mantra as well. Enjoy life even when it hurts. When it hurts most, think about others. It helps.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Sean.
Thank you so much for being on SAA Storytellers. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I was just so interested in your story and your connections of family within AS. And then we got started talking about travel a little bit, which I also love. We connected on travel. So tell me a little bit about your travels And I think you have a project you're working on too to hand down to your children. You want to talk about that?
Well, I guess we've always liked to travel. My husband really likes to travel. I'm much more the stay-at-home, but because he likes to travel, I like to travel with him. And so it's just made our life much richer. And so as our grandchildren were growing up, when they were small, they'd say, "Grandma and Grandpa, where have you been?" And show us on the map. And we would show them, and they were quite intrigued. And I thought, someday I want to put this into some format so that they know where we've been. And so I found these 3 great big bins of pictures, but I had them all organized by folders of where each trip was and something special about it. So I started scanning pictures. Well, I couldn't scan all of them, but I would scan about 4 from each trip. And then we would go through and remember some of the wonderful things that happened on that trip. I am now up to past 1999. And we have just enjoyed going through all of these travels again, and hope that our children and grandchildren will enjoy it just as much. And so that's what I'm doing. In fact, now on the top of the boxes, I've said, these are scanned. You can throw them when you're ready.
Okay, I love that. The digital cloud generation. So a little question for you that I hadn't run past you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So what's it like traveling with AS? Did it ever give you any issues?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There were times, for one thing, pillows can just cause my neck to go bonkers. So travel is not good that way. Pulling suitcases can set it off. But I take a whole medicine chest with me of things that might be helpful. I have learned that if I'm on a bus that's going back and forth, your neck is going back and forth, I wear a neck brace for short trips because it just keeps it stable. So there's a lot of things I've learned along the way. I have doctors that have been very good about saying, if you feel like this is what you can do. So yeah, it's just planning ahead. And sometimes if we're on a cruise and there's a shore excursion, I might say, all right, today I'm going to just not go. I'm just going to enjoy looking out or walking around a little bit, but not anything heavy. But you just adapt to the travel. Mm-hmm. And I would not want it to keep me from going anywhere.
And it didn't, which is really inspiring. The other thing I wanted to commend you about, especially with your story and our conversation today, this whole talking about generations and then identifying folks who may have had AS before you, whether it was diagnosed or not, I think is really important, especially if people don't know that much about their history or anything. And you're really documenting some important information here now. And I hope your family appreciates what you're doing for them.
Interestingly, the rheumatologist that diagnosed me said, please share this with your family, your siblings, your nieces and nephews, anyone in your future, because they should be aware of it.
Absolutely.
And I have done that.
And thank you for doing that. It's such a huge part of what we do here at SAA is to have folks know their family history. And I even believe Thanksgiving on the calendar is also like National Family History Day or something like that, encouraging people to talk, at dinner when they only see each other, perhaps at one time of year, to talk about family history stuff or anything that may come up. So, Linda, I can't thank you enough for participating in this project. I feel smarter. I definitely want to go plan my next trip because of you. And I definitely want to make some sense out of my pictures because they are a mess. I need to clean them up. But thank you so much for doing this project. I hope it was good good for you, and you enjoyed working with us and getting to know SAA. And thank you so much for being here.
And thank you. I have found your website amazing and helpful. Thank you.
Many thanks to Linda for sharing her touching and motivating story, and thanks so much for being part of SAA Storytellers. What a wonderful group of storytellers. I've been watching the comments come through. Thank you so much. It seems like everyone had a good time listening to these folks and supporting them. Vince Gagliardi, Minnie Wilson, Jamie Boder, and Linda Strand. Thank you so much for being brave and sharing your personal medical journey with us. So I hope you'll check out our archived webpage with previous SAA Storytellers Your Stories on Stage presentations. There's lots of great stories there. We'll put a link in the chat to that. So thank you so much for helping us to create community and empathy through the power of story. I love storytelling so much. I hope it's obvious, and it's my pleasure to bring my passion for it with you tonight. So another big thank you to Bristol Myers Squibb for helping us to make this space possible. And I'll put another link in the post for the feedback survey in the chat, just in case you'd like to connect with us. So that's it. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I hope that you have a great night. Thanks again, and thanks so much for supporting SAA and being here. I'll see you soon.